All right. I'm just getting started. I'm waiting for some people to come in. For anybody that might be stumbling on this whole little concept that I got going on here, this is WNDC. WNDC stands for We in the Crib and You Ain't. In DC. I'm hoping to rather entertain or enlighten or offer a alternative to a lot of the other directions of things that people are out there doing that catches your attention. This time I've not plugged my music directly into my system because, well, I haven't quite mastered this production thing yet, but I hope that if you find any of this enlightening, entertaining, or educational, you would find a way of sliding over to my Cash App or throwing a little love in there, because nothing says thank you like cash. Now, I'm hoping that this could be one for the books, because I've been really banging my head around so many different topics and whatnot that have been occurring lately. And in the process of it, I haven't been able to get my act together. I haven't been able to focus because there's so many trending things that have been catching my attention, and and this whole COVID thing, and the mere fact that I'm not working offers me more of the ability to be introverted and, in many cases, unproductive. While my mind is going a billion miles and 17,000 directions about things that I'm starting to see from a perspective where, luckily, I'm able to actually recall how things looked and smelled and felt at a time that most people can only look up on a Google search and revisit it by way of media and entertainment. And yet, I'm just going to get so many things off my mind to a point where I'm going to see how long they're going to allow me to even be on, depending on. I'm hoping that somebody will find me on at least YouTube, because that's the only place that I can see any comments. As some might have found in the title, this one's not that simple. A lot of this comes from the very core of what a lot of people are struggling with today, and that's our reality, our sexuality, our polarity, and how we now, in our newfound freedoms, have become allotted the ability to demand our own need for respect. All lives are mattering more than it's ever been before on the history of humanity on this planet, and therefore here we are on Front Street, from Facebook to YouTube and beyond, sharing these little gems of our experiences as we evolve into more of a unified nation, as a world, as humanity, in all of its fairness and grace. And therefore, my little face is only just one cog in this little thing. And I really want to get and I really want to wish everyone an open mind enough to just picture, if you will, where we are now as a nation, as a race, as a people today, struggling with these societal conflicts and opinions and political aspirations and emotional discomfort, trying to define the insanity that exists right now all over the planet and its possibility of how it will affect us in the future by way of the need for us to believe that we need to do what we feel is needed today. And yet, what I'm noticing is the first little obstacle is the definition of what we defined as feminism. Because until feminism was respected and has become something that even the newer generations are putting in their profiles, I think that we're partially ill-informed as to how things that they wanted to define or accept as I'm down with these people is not quite the people that you believed or understood them to be enough to be related, because this author Edith Villar that I've quoted, will be sharing a little bits and pieces of her snippets of the concept and the mere fact that while anyone would want to be offended by a male, cis male type of color, bringing up and having the audacity to share such a sensitive subject, I would like to point out first and foremost that, hate begins hate and begins hate. And while we want to hate all of the people who want to utilize the blame of the race of racism and everything on the white man, the white man, the this, that, and the other, there is another instinct that we still have to understand due to the mere fact that we kind of, all combined our desires for emancipation unfairly associated with us with people whom still to this day have no sympathy or solidarity personally, and live quite a not my daughter mentality, even when we speak of the very core of what we call feminism. This lady, Edith, a lot of her theories and whatnot were mostly insulting to the feminist movement due to the mere fact that the definitions into which she defined what feminism was about and what type of female was feminist and which one weren't, actually were skewed in whom they were in the mindset of the people who were debating them then and who we are today. What I found kind of interesting is how, and speaking of it, she would constantly use little key phrases and trigger words like submission and subservient and manipulation and what some would call reverse abuse of sorts. And now when you look back at many of the cue points in her theories, many of them now have become the arguing points that feminists today utilize without even associating or agreeing with the mere fact that the feminists that of the time that it was invented were not the feminists that most people are today. Actually, the Ediths were more in that mindset and compared to the mindset of many of the feminists today. And there's nothing wrong with feminism. As a matter of fact, it's the cog in the machine that today is causing so much more outer kind of things. We want to talk about racism. We want to talk about the tragedy in Georgia with the Asian massage parlors without talking about the feminism involved in the twist and turns of how feminism really exists in the skin that they're in, and yet the best thing we had going for us back then was that people of color, of all colors, were trying to be at the same place that feminists were demanding their just due from their emancipation from this big back bad white guy that we've all found to be the boogeyman of our discomfort as people today trying to be respected and allowed. I kind of want to find a place somewhere in this whole broadcast to just share some of the snippets of this Edith Villar and her conflict with her views and her concept and the feminist movement of the day that actually got so dramatically deep that it was the first time that actual women were ready to become, take their lady off of them and get real medieval with their own kind. As if she was the enemy of all enemy to femininity. And reading it today, it's boggles my mind when I think about it from today's perspective, how many of the points that she had then would have come out a lot differently today with the assistance of people like Oprah's and and all of the other major feminist people who would have some form of understanding of how feminism was being defined. And for that reason, I think this is a good place for me to introduce this subject. All right. So there you go. I'm gonna have to play around with this little gadget I got here, just because I need to go all the way back to where all of this really makes sense. And hopefully, if I'm lucky, I can let you have all of it while I try to motivate myself and try to get, a life after this. I hope you can hear this. Oh, man. man. All right, y'all gonna have to bear with me for a second because I've got technical difficulties. Okay, I see what the problem is. I'm an AV tech. I can do this. Okay. Wow. Come on, man. Come on, what I want. There it is. Is it? Hey. Oh, damn it. You know what? I really have been trying to hope that I was actually getting somewhere with this, but I have to figure out how to get this unit to engage. Because this don't make no damn sense. It's not what I want. And all this revolves around me being able to offer you this other thing. So it's only been 15 minutes. I can be excused for still setting up. All right. All right. If this only initialize. Oh, you know why? Operator error. Okay, I see why now. One damn cord. That's all it takes is one damn card to mess up the whole production. All right. There we go. Bet you show up now. You sure did. All right. Okay. All right, this is much better. Much better. Hopefully now you can hear me out. You know what? Later for Instagram. I already see right now you ain't gonna let me be great, so fine. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna hop over to Facebook just so I can see if I can catch myself within this, and maybe I can possibly do a better service than this. Okay, there I am. 18 minutes. 18 minutes and what? All right. Okay. All right. 18:36. So I'm a little behind. So this should kick in 20 minutes from there. So I got a 20-minute lag on what I got here. Okay. This is better. Now.
Chapter 3. What is woman? A woman is, as we have already said, in contrast to a man, a human being who does not work. One might in fact leave it at that, for there isn't much more to say about her, if the basic conception of a human being were not too general, too inexact, to embrace both man and woman.
There you go. All right. So what we have here is that subject. And I know that subject's going to suck for a lot of people who might be coming in wondering. I mean, because I'm 20 minutes in and I'm finally just getting you the correct definition of where I'm going within this broadcast. So, a lot of the things that this author and whatnot was into
Chapter 3.
that provided so much controversy during 1971 to 78, and then we went to sleep. Everybody, we went to sleep from our sexuality, our identities, our isms. We literally lost it, and then crack came in the 80s and killed Applejack, and a lot of us ain't got back, and it's now to 2021 and beyond, and we're
Hello, and welcome to this reading of Esther Vilar's 1971 book, The Manipulated Man. This is a fun little polemical essay penned by a self-proclaimed feminine feminist, as opposed to a masculine feminist. And she's somewhat of an obscure figure. I believe it.
Okay, this is a fun little read. Ghost stories are fun little reads
now.
because
I hope
ghosts. So for him to say this is basically saying,
I hope this is working out right.
Esther Vilar.
I'm going to check on it in the other room.
There's a couple of interviews with her on YouTube, as well as in text. But my info on her is pretty much what I get from the book blurb. On this, it says, Miss Vilar, at the time of writing the book, was 36 years old. She is a Argentinian German. She used to be a sociologist and a doctor before becoming a best-selling author. The book that I hold in my hand has become quite popular among the red pill crowd, which is where I found it personally, and it's become a sort of easily digestible, sort of fun first little red pill, I guess, for guys that are just new to this stuff.
Wow.
I guess for guys that are just new to this stuff.
Wow. This is a seminal piece of work. And this guy's calling it a fun little read, and also uses the red pill crowd, which is actually true, but he may as well have said incel crowd or anything.
Capable of looking at things from a distance, and as a result, they are completely without any sense of humor. No, woman does not laugh at man. At most, she might get irritated. The old institutions of house and home are not yet so obviously outdated and derelict that she can't justify her relinquishing all intellectual pursuits and her renouncing all claims to better jobs. One does wonder, though, what will happen when housework is still further mechanized, when there are enough good nursery schools nearby, or when, as must occur before long, men discover that children are not an essential.
Oh, by the way, being 50 years ago, she couldn't know a lot of these things. We know it doesn't matter. We're at the point where, as she says, there's enough nurseries and there's enough easy housework. Men don't care. Men know that children aren't necessary. Men don't get together with the woman for children.
Please pay attention.
Men don't get together with the woman for children. This is what she's been pushing, this idea that men do want children at the same time, but they will sacrifice
I'm going to try to
children to be with the woman. The number one thing for these guys is to have that woman to provide mental security. So she's wrong about that.
If only man would stop for one moment in his heedless rush towards progress and think about this state of affairs, he would inevitably come to realize that his efforts to give women a sense of mental stimulation have been totally in vain.
So she's wrong about that.
If only man would stop for one moment in his heedless rush towards progress and think about this state of affairs, he would inevitably come to realize that his efforts to give women a sense of mental stimulation have been totally in vain. It is true that woman gets progressively more elegant, more well-groomed, more cultured, but her demands on life will always be material, never intellectual. Has she ever made use of the mental processes he teaches at his universities to develop her own theories? Has she made use of the research institutes he has thrown open to her for any kind of original individual research of her own? Will it never occur to man that woman does not read the wonderful books with which he fills his libraries? And though she may well admire his marvelous works of art in museums, she herself will never create, only copy. Even the plays and films, visual exhortations to women on her own level to liberate herself are judged only by their entertainment value. Has she ever made use of the mental processes he teaches at his universities to develop her own theories? Has she made use of the research institutes he has thrown open to her for any kind of original individual research of her own? Will it never occur to man that woman does not read the wonderful books with which he fills his libraries? And though she may well admire his marvelous works of art in museums, she herself will never create, only copy. Even the plays and films' visual exhortations to women on her own level to liberate herself are judged only by their entertainment value. There will never be a first step towards revolution. When a man, believing the woman his equal, realizes the futility of her way of life, he naturally tends to think that it must be his fault and that he must be suppressing her. There will never be a first step towards revolution. When a man, believing the woman his equal, realizes the futility of her way of life, he naturally tends to think that it must be his fault and that he must be suppressing her. Yet in our time, women have no longer been subjected to the will of men. In fact, quite the contrary. They've been given every opportunity of achieving freedom, and if, after all this time, they have not liberated themselves and thrown off their shackles, we can only arrive at one conclusion. Yet in our time, women have no longer been subjected to the will of men. In fact, quite the contrary. They've been given every opportunity of achieving freedom, and if, after all this time, they have not liberated themselves and thrown off their shackles, we can only arrive at one conclusion, that there are, in fact, none to throw off. They've been given every opportunity of achieving freedom, and if, after all this time, they have not liberated themselves and thrown off their shackles, we can only arrive at one conclusion, that there are, in fact, none to throw off.
There you go. There you go. There you go. That's one of the most important things she has said. I don't think I need to play too much more. I'll put it in the description box so you guys can listen to the whole thing. But like I say, she just mentioned way back then. This is back when, the second wave feminists were going strong. And she was saying there was no shackles then. Men never oppressed women. She was saying what I said just this year, 50 years ago. She saw it. So men have been gaslighted by the opposite sex, from the dawn of time, for decades and decades at least, across the world, throughout history. Esther Villar challenged people's concept of what the sexes are. It's basically like Galileo saying the sun doesn't revolve around the earth revolves around the sun. So that's what he's saying is a fun little read. This is earth-shattering what she was saying. Men are not brave people. We're not braver than the opposite sex. We want that woman to make us feel secure. Men choose security over freedom. Men are not brave people. We're not braver than the opposite sex. We want that woman to make us feel secure. Men choose security over freedom. This is what our actual nature is. And as you say, she, in this book of hers, she gives a scathing review on female nature of her own sex. And as I said, guys went back to sleep because they didn't know what to do with their freedom. And the only reason this book got made and listened to at all is because Esther Villar is a woman. And as I said, guys went back to sleep. And that was just the beginning of it. Basically, she admitted that women basically don't work for a living. Or as she says, intermittently at best. That's why housewives are still a thing. It's leeching off a man. And the only reason this book got made and listened to at all is because Esther Villar is a woman. Matter of fact, I saw a debate between her and a feminist back in '73. And the feminists kept pushing the idea that her husband, Esther Villar's husband, had written the book. And you know why? Because if Esther Villar said, "Oh yeah, I just copied it, my husband wrote it," then the battle was won. The debate was won. If Esther Villar said, "Oh yeah, I just copied it, my husband wrote it," then the battle was won. The debate was won. And this is what's frightening. Is that all they have to do is say a man wrote it, and then you could ignore everything about it. Because it would just be, she even admitted, Villar, that if her husband had wrote it, it wouldn't have gotten noticed. It wouldn't have gotten published. People would have just said, he's an angry man, who cares? If her husband had wrote it, it wouldn't have gotten noticed. He's an angry man, who cares? It wouldn't have gotten published. People would have just said, he's an angry man, who cares? 1984 got it wrong. Because in 1984, Winston here and Julia, Winston would start talking after their tryst, after the romantic tryst with Julia about, politics and ideology, and Julia would fall asleep. The powers that be in 1984 programmed the younger generation to fall asleep. Winston here and Julia, Winston would start talking after their tryst, after the romantic tryst with Julia about, politics and ideology, and Julia would fall asleep. The powers that be in 1984 programmed the younger generation to fall asleep. So the powers that be in 1984 programmed the younger generation to fall asleep, so that they never gained any insight about their situation. So that they never gained any insight about their situation. But it's the other way around. Winston is the guy. He's the one who would have fallen asleep. Because that's what's happening. Winston is the guy. He's the one who would have fallen asleep. Because that's what's happening. Men read Esther Villar and then just went to sleep. Because that's what's happening. Men read Esther Villar and then just went to sleep. Because again, it's about them looking at her and saying, this book doesn't offer me anything. It doesn't offer me the comfortable slavery that I desire.
Today, I wanted to talk about the discrimination and harassment that Esther Villar faced after she wrote the book, The Manipulated Man. And I find this fascinating. I read her book about 10 years ago, and there was a lot that I did agree with and a lot that I didn't agree with. I never would have guessed that this is how society treated her after she wrote this book. Villar's book, The Manipulated Man, is based on the premise that, women saying that they are the weaker sex and all this stuff is really just a ruse. And in fact, we are the ones that have it easy and men have it tough by having to go out and work for us all day and protect us and provide for us, and start thinking like, oh, everything's getting so bad, it's the worst it's ever been, everything's getting so bad, it's the worst it's ever been. It's funny because these feminists that were attacking her back in the 70s when she wrote The Manipulated Man are now the people espousing a lot of her same views, saying things like housewives are equivalent to prostitutes. So, they've been around forever. People have always been offended by radical ideas. That sometimes we can get discouraged and start thinking like, oh, everything's getting so bad, it's the worst it's ever been, SJWs sensitive people, all these polite police. Apparently they've been around forever. Sensitive people, all these polite police. Apparently they've been around forever. People have always been offended by radical ideas. And like I said, I read her book, The Manipulated Man. And if you haven't read it, I do recommend checking it out.
Hey, what's happening, Grady?
Because it is kind of like
I know it's going to be a minute on the lag on there, but
you'll,
I just happen to see you over there on Facebook, and there's a lag.
People do reference it a bit.
You can find me
Once
directly
you've read it, you'll start
on
noticing
YouTube.
that people do reference it a bit, and so it's just kind of nice to know what they're talking about. And I did agree with almost all of her observations, but I didn't agree with her interpretation or solutions. They are ruining it for the rest of us. And what she said about housewives being against the women's liberation movement and feminism, I would say is absolutely true.
You'll not believe this, but that cough actually caused more of a bandwidth and
They sit around and they're like,
and a lag. I'm digging that.
They are ruining it for the rest of us. I don't know if it is stupidity. Honestly, I don't even know what else it could be. I can understand a woman wanting to have a career because that's just something she's very passionate about. But what I cannot understand is that a woman can interpret a housewife as someone who is oppressed. I can understand a woman wanting to have a career because that's just something she's very passionate about. But what I cannot understand is how a woman can interpret a housewife as someone who is oppressed, as someone who is a slave to her husband. And me and my friends will just be like, dude, do you know what a slave is? And the fact that women act like by not having to do more and by turning ourselves into wage slaves, we somehow get more free. I mean, we just turn into parts of a system. So, and then she really points out how feminism would be quite a disadvantage for women and not this big, great hurrah that everyone acts like it would be. And she is also known as being a hero of the women's rights movement, or a lot of MRA type activists really like her, or MGTOW activists really like her because she exposes the fact that, women are really just like prostitutes. And I don't know. I mean, it's very stupid. Because her big solution is for us to just women to work, men to work, and then the kids get raised basically by the government. So there's not really a way to have her worldview unless you are a socialist or a communist or something. I don't know. I mean, it's very stupid because her big solution is for us to just women to work, men to work, and then the kids get raised basically by the government. So there's not really a way to have her worldview unless you are a socialist or a communist or something, because
I really hope that
it
you're
really
listening.
does rely on the government stepping in to take over that parental role.
And
So like I said, I don't agree with her. Yeah, obviously I don't agree with her, but it's so odd that this would have created such a violent and visceral reaction in the 1970s. So let's
women.
look into some of the havoc that Esther Villar faced for her writings in
1970. 50 years.
1971, 15 years ago.
She was
50-something
saying
years ago.
stuff that MGTOW started talking about 40 years before that. And men would, when this book came out, it made a splash, then men went back to sleep.
Back
No,
to sleep.
one can hardly assume men do all this for pleasure and without feeling a desire for change. They do it because they've been manipulated into doing it. Their whole life is nothing but a series of conditioned reflexes, a series of animal acts. A man who is no longer able to perform these acts, whose earning capacity is lessened, is considered a failure. Indeed, he
I so
stands to
appreciate
lose
that,
everything.
Gray.
Wife,
I
family,
also dig the mere
home,
fact that
his whole purpose in
we
life.
turn
All the things, in fact, which
the
give him
speakers off.
security. Of course, one might say that a man
get a
who has
caption.
lost his capacity for earning money is automatically freed from his burden and should be glad about this happy ending. But freedom is the last thing that he wants. Indeed, he stands to lose everything: wife, family, home, his whole purpose in life. All the things, in fact, which give him security. Of course, one might say that a man who has lost his capacity for earning money is automatically freed from his burden and should be glad about this happy ending. But freedom is the last thing that he wants. He functions, as we shall see later, according to the principle of pleasure and non-freedom. To be sentenced to a lifelong freedom is even worse than to be sentenced to a life of slavery. To put it another way, man is always searching for someone or something to enslave him, for only as a slave does he feel safe, and as a rule his choice falls on woman.
Please listen.
Chapter 3. What is woman? A woman is, as we have already said, in contrast to a man, a human being who does not work. One might in fact leave it at that, for there isn't much more to say about her, if the basic conception of a human being were not too general, too inexact to embrace both man and woman.
There you go.
And there we are. Now, if you're paying attention, and I really hope that you do, then you'll understand how conflictive this whole reality of a history that existed while our history was existing in a manner to which most of us were led to believe this is the way it was. And now here we are, 2021, and the age of Aquarius, and all of this new stuff is upon us, and we still are speaking the old English, but it's not the Queen's English. But understand that from the base into which this Edith Villar was coming from was from a UK European kind of standpoint, and yet there is why the lack of what some would question. Well, you know, all men, you down with the men's rights. Well, what about the black men? Well, in the UK, what a lot of people don't realize is, see, when we come to America, we really are on a strictly white and black kind of thing. When you go to the UK, you are on such a intricate kind of, that it's almost like what people of color have been trying to make white people understand about the diversity in whom they may be, not just in the mere fact of their structure or their shade, but so many other variants that, you know, you can go to the UK and not know that you were with a Welsh or with a Irish or with a Spanish or with a Latin or with a Greek or with a Turkey, or, you know, and the farther into the Midwest and around the world that you get, you'll find the intricacies in that existed long before Black Lives Matter became a worldwide thing. And that's due to the mere fact that, you know, a lot of people of color have been, in some cases, culturally forced to be secondary, thirdary, in whom there you can get to this level, but you cannot get to this level, kind of thing. And here we are growing into this world where you can all get to this level. This is what we now have to raise each and every one of our offspring from this point on, due to the mere fact that even though we don't believe it's going to happen in our lifetime, there's more of a chance that it will in theirs. And so we have to prepare our offspring to believe almost in a fantasy state of a reality that still has not been allowed to exist everywhere all willy-nilly quite just yet. The same way that in the last broadcast I spoke about how my man man, what was he with George with anyway, he said the worst thing that happened to America is when they emancipated all the people of color. They emancipated millions of uneducated, unaware, unprepared people onto a society full of people that were halfway ignorant and insignificant, and they're still the same people, group of people, and those are the same ones storming the Capitol and all this other stuff. Same. I'm not trying to be racist within the races, but, having to realize that there is an importance in you as a person of non-color to understand the identification of a redneck, a hillbilly, crossroad, and then it gets only to a complexity when we get back to this subject and realize that, technically speaking, this has all been about a certain kind of caliber of white woman that all women have been trying to aspire to in their mind's eye, just due to the mere fact that they had the same princess to imagine themselves possible of being. And here we are dealing with the Queen's castle, dealing with the same kind of concept, because what they've done more than anything else is allowed the possibility of they're capable of being more of a respect for that Harry's wife inheriting at a later date the respect of being an honorable queen than a lot of the other crispy biscuits that are concerned about the texture or the color of their offspring, in the family picture. And yet, that's no different than what a lot of these other people today are dealing with. It's just that they're not significant. And we've been allowed now to, the more that we get access to the media, the more we are allowed to make this dance and be actually affected and triggered with all these other complex lives and stuff. Used to be the soap opera. And people would turn on at a certain channels to listen to the stories. And they would get so involved with the stories that they would really honestly believe. And back then, these stars would get on the television on the interviews at late night, and they talk about how much fan mail they would get and how they were so surprised as to the amount of fan mail that they got that wasn't quite positive. And then they would get into the mere fact that many of these that were very, very extreme were so caught up into the characters into which they were playing that they were uncomfortable continually playing the bad guy or whatnot in these things, because there were death threats from a mom and pop people who really had no business storming the Capitol because it's the same. And we're trying to act like this is supposed to be so cut and dry of a world, and why can't we just be great? When, first of all, the amount of people who say that, be it any color or culture that you have, especially in this country, actually is in more of a minority, and yet we are still the working pieces of the society into which has been coddling all our other ignorant people who really don't have much to do. And they can't handle the truth because it would make them have that responsibility, like in that statement when the sister was talking to Nico Giovanni and a couple of the other ones, and she said, the problem with women is that, we want what we want, but if we set any standards into which we define as exactly what we want as the image of that strong black sister, then we'll be held accountable for that. At any given time, we decide to be whatever we feel like being, and that's something that they just don't want to do. And yet, as I fix my my Bluetooth again, I'm gonna try to keep you back on point of where we're at in this conversation.
Chapter 3. What is woman? A woman is, as we have already said, in contrast to a man, a human being who does not work. One might in fact leave it at that, for there isn't much more to say about her if the basic conception of a human being were not too general, too inexact to embrace both man and woman.
There you go.
So I sit back here as I watch the current kind of thing, and we talking about current news with thing that happened with the little poor boy that was stated to have had a bad day. Poor boy had a bad day. And I tried to be philosophically sympathetic in my sadistic manner enough to be able to play this whole scene as a cartoon of sorts with the newly discovered information of the texture of the what's, whens, and whys that this little boy end up in the news trending in the first place. Now, speaking as one of the inner elder grandmothers, we can spit grits on this one because, you know, as people of color, this is what would be done in our community. And to sit back and to think that that poor boy had grown in such a manner in the rearing that no longer existed enough to teach little Jimmy right enough and wrong enough to not be in that kind of shape, to go end up putting their poor mama and daddy on Front Street with him for having created that little monster. And if they would have kept him at home and dealt with their own problems in him, he wouldn't have got out and killed all of those poor people out there. And yet and still, one of the more sadistically tempting directions to that would be just the mere connection to that Sigmund Freud, you know, it all goes back to your mother. And if you think about that in the contents of what Edith Villar was at, speaking about it from not even our business over here in America. She was speaking of this from how the old world was still stuck in this kind of princess and a pea, while even still they were ruled by the queen with no king. And so the concept of, you know, being a slave to the rhythm is not so doggone difficult when you're people of color, because we've grown to accept that in a manner where we can at least dance through it and sing spirituals as we go ahead and, you know, make our country great again for, you know, them and all of that. But here we are, and we've got too many. We've got too many people who, while they don't want to take any of the blame for what their ancestors were a part of, they're not taking any responsibility for where you, in these shoes that you stand in next to us as a nation, trying to do something that the queen would not hear of, just down over the pond. And we can't get our stuff together because, yes, this all falls back on our greater commodity, our women. And how the majority of our women all believe that they're feminists without understanding the true value of what being a female and the responsibilities in our culture actually demand that we try to respect enough to be able to teach each other, to prepare our next generations to be capable of handling marrying a prince or princess, being and running a kingdom, and not trying to bow out. I can't do that. I ain't gonna never be nothing. Mom and Daddy already done told me 15 million times. Can't get out of this trailer park. And yet we're sitting around here and we're trying to jump on every bandwagon of what matters, as long as we ain't got to keep saying Black Lives Matters, and all the other people who still feel the need to matter are with us. And our hardest problem is we can't get to our sisters respectfully and say, sister, you are my everything, but you have a virus. You have a virus that even people like Edith Villar feared would happen to her race of people. And it's happening to our race of people. And in the same manner of them sitting back and saying, look, what do you want? Because the bottom line is, at some point in our humanity, it's going to come to a point where these relationship goals that people struggle and strive to have respectfully are impossible to orchestrate due to the mere fact that they're incapable of understanding their responsibility and their responsibility. Because for every person that says, I want a man, you know, the hardest thing that they have to deal with, the hardest thing that they have to deal with is ain't no man. And not understanding that we're in a community now that was even spoken about then, that even the feminists decided that they, no, I'm not saying that we want us all to be on equal. We pay our own rent and we do our own things, and we stop trying to blame men for the reason why we still can't get what we want at the price of men, in a manner where if you're slipping, can't nobody tell you no different. Even Michael Baston was talking about how, why is it that sisters can't even check each other? It's gotten so bad that the only thing that people can do is agree to fight for the right for them to not be checkable instantly. No man should have to tell you what this, that, and the other, and yet you want to have a head of the household. You can't even understand the even concept that the more you instinctively feel that way, the less you're even capable of respecting your own religion, due to the mere fact that it was orchestrated in the image of man. And you can't even find a better respect, even if we were to give that to man. We've lost the ability to wake up our own secret weapon. And it's happening more so as we all find ourselves struggling in this country at this time, at moments where our tragedies become new crusades. All Asian lives matter like every other life matters too. And yet, here we are in 2021, still bringing up how there's a epidemic going on. And it's going too far. And I know you want to talk about this other thing about the we the people, but right now we need for you to come over and identify us. And we want to call it racism, but it's bigotry. Because it's the only thing that gives you the audacity to tell someone else exactly how you feel without any possibility of there being a consideration that there might be some reason for you to be in a state of hysterics due to a subliminal belief that generations long before you fell for enough to not even be able to equip you with the ability for you to be better than you are right now. Enough to be a credit to your own family and your own race, because that's why we raise our offspring. And if we can't stop and consider the odds of how these gems that they leave out when they want to teach the story of our feminism, when they want to teach the story of our LGBTQ, whatever, when they want to tell the story of their religion, when they want to tell their story of all these other things, they leave out so many tidbits of all the other people. They couldn't stand for trying to wake up people who they gotten better at putting to sleep. And now we can't wake up because we can't wake all the way up. We want to kind of still lay around. We want to kind of be given the grace of not necessarily having to be totally on board with the full kind of thing. We want to at least take time enough to go protest with the other people. We want it now. And then they go back home and we've got another year of more lives having to be mattered. We should have been long past that a long time ago. Just for the mere fact that don't nobody question why we got a Chinatown in most of the major metropolises of this country. It's just that most people have gotten so off the way that they just start picking on any kind of person of color. It ain't like the status quo. Many people have found themselves conveniently able to just shave and haircut and put on an outfit, and you can fit right in with any other supreme group of people who don't see color. Wink, wink, nod, nod. But we like you, Karen, Bobby, Jim, Angela Renee. That Mustafa dude. Oh, he's so perfect. And he's so toxic. He's so alpha. He's so and we not realize that the whole image of what we believe to be masculinity is therefore enough to be toxic. It's a setup. Those people weren't even the people to be feared. And that's why we're run by subservient non-sexual men of power who have a fetish to play the game of Barbie for the pleasure of being in servitude, and then tell everybody else in the kingdom, you should be a good princess too. You can be king of the jungle. And yet we can't get to her other book of Polly enough to be able to explain the whole lion concept. And yet we're trying to reinvent it in our lifestyles and our relationship dynamics today. And I think this is a good point for me to really let all of this be said and done.
Chapter 3. What is woman? A woman is, as we have already said, in contrast to a man, a human being who does not work. One might in fact leave it at that, for there isn't much more to say about her if the basic conception of a human being were not too general, too inexact to embrace both man and woman.
There you go.
Now, I want to point out, due to the mere fact that this is my channel, that I'm speaking strictly from a personal color standpoint when I mention the mere fact that while the feminist movement was on full blow, black men were still not and have still not been cleared as a whole to be in the same dominance and therefore privilege to be like our governor of New York, and that only 5 or 6 women is what it takes to actually have them the call for his. And yet we have literally structured ourselves to always believe that those powerful little white guys like Trump, this, that, and the other, can have any perversion they want as long as they are immune to the stigma built around the alternative to what feminists claim was the bad thing. How feminists called housewives evil. A total embarrassment of the whole gender. And yet we have more people claiming to be and obstructed of that, to empower themselves as sheer goddesses without the understanding of the responsibility you're supposed to have. And when you understand how it works, when you find someone that wants to be of service to you and not just service you. And yet we're making a muck out of a lot of things that don't have to be this serious. When we realize that really honestly, all of us that are who we are, regardless of how we might look in our own cultural manner, are actually more prone and poised to be at the level and the state that everyone else, hates to feel that they're never going to get, in order to be never seen as all the other things that are folklored and stereotyped in whom they believe someone else to be due to their impossibility. And one of the biggest discomforts has been these dominant, toxic men of color. Past anything else, because they could never get away with the same thing that this governor in New York has given. And we can't even go into the Kennedys or all the rest of these other people too. So let's not get into the race card, because that negates the offense that has been played on even our females who believe that they're in struggle and defense, at war with the male, cis male kind of understanding, when they're basically just not capable of understanding the structure and the systematic, responsibility of each polaric state into which you are. You want to be a good housewife, then you have to run a good ship that you can do from your bedroom. And everybody is happy to be on that ship. That's why there are no male ships. And yet we can't keep enough women afloat, because they're mentally dealing with so many things they don't want to handle, that are dealing with them because they're being triggered by other things that they don't know why they're being untriggered to this, and nobody can wake them up, let alone the men that they keep talking about. Why are they so asleep? I can't stand this. Why are they all, I'm looking for, I'm hard to handle. I need somebody that's going to put it down. I need this, that, and the other. And you're going, no, you don't. You can train anybody to doggone do that kind of thing. It's provable. But you got to understand what the hell it requires. And why you? Why not? So I'm going to leave all of this in a state of where Edith Pilar put me in with all the rest of this is going on. And hopefully my people, including people of color, can find this rather enlightening, entertaining, or educational enough to just consider the concept of how we just came up from at least Sesame Street. But we're not ready to be able to handle the responsibility of understanding why these are the people in your neighborhood is a lot more deeper when you understand that they're so much more complex in their polarities, and how each one of them requires to be handled in a manner that may seem strange and uncomfortable, but it's worth it. If you realize it's better to understand how to speak other languages without having to learn their language. That might not sound like anything, but when you understand the difference between having to communicate and relate It'll get you all over the planet without having to learn their language. But right now, we really have to get a hold of our women. Every color, every race, every this, that, the other. There's too many of them out there that are really struggling with this stigma, this fear, this insecurity, this struggle of, I just want to feel. Why can't I feel? I want to feel. I want to this. That's empowerment. That's what the whole feminist movement was supposed to be doing. Giving them a forever for the rest of the humanity of this, that empowerment. So why are we at 2021 dealing with so many of them who put that on their profile, still struggling with the lack of empowerment on every cylinder all day, every day, respectfully? Men can't do it for them. They wanted to do. Women can no longer do it for each other. And nobody wants to piss anybody else off in order to do that. We used to handle hysterics in a manner of, hey, get a hold of yourself. Thanks, I needed that. Today, that's abuse. For that reason, this is WNDC. WNDC stands for We in the Crib, and You Ain't. NDC, and I hope that you found something worth donating, sharing, and liking. You good?